Ooh. Oh. Oh, thank you for coming. I went out last night and it was very good and very tempting to stay out. So I'm impressed that you're all here. I'm also very interested to know what everyone does, because there's so many crossovers, and I kind of feel like there's so much potential for collaborations, and this is really exciting when all these minds kind of come together. In a normal kind of setting, I would say that I'm always kind of quite careful about saying, asking people what they do for a living, because I feel that it shouldn't necessarily define them, and some people really just don't enjoy what they do. But I do, because, I make badass limbs. So it says here, is this working? Here we go. Ah. Oh, it's okay, maybe I was just... Yeah. Yeah, it should be here. Oh, sorry everybody. Here we go.
Okay. Can you come to that?
That's cool. That's okay. I like Namur. It's very nice. It's a really cool city. And I'd like to stick around, but I've got to get a train at 1 o'clock. So I think I've got like a couple of hours. So I'm going to dart about in some exhibitions and stuff. But this is very beautiful, this place. It's good? Cool. So where were we? Oh yeah, I make badass limbs. So let's see. Just a couple of examples. Okay, right. So when I was little, like everyone, you asked little people what they want to do, what they want to be when they're older, and I would be like, oh, I want to be an adventurer, an explorer. I want to be like a mad scientist, or I want to be inventing things. And I'm not doing any of those, but at the same time, I kind of feel like I am, because I'm kind of the whole exploring thing. I feel like all these worlds that connect. So you've got like the science, the medicine, technology, and the art all kind of combining together. And ultimately, there's a person behind every single one of these projects. So there's psychology as well. So I find all of that really fascinating. And then there's the making side, and also the inventions, just coming up with these exciting ideas. So I'm known for down in people's phones as Sophie limbs, Sophie legs, Sophie arms. It's all consuming with what I do. So like I said about people identifying with what they do as a living, this I really, really do. And so, yeah, this is an example actually of, I'd often just be walking around town and I'll have a leg sticking out the back. I normally cover up the foot, but normally, yeah, carrying around, or I'm in the middle of a conversation, I'm suddenly like, oh my God, I've got to get back and turn the oven off because I've got a finger that needs to be turned off. It's going to cure. So, so always, limbs are always on the mind. This was from I remember going on my way somewhere with some limbs, and you can see the strap is broken, and that's because I was walking down the train, the steps to the train, and my bag just split and all these limbs came out, and then all obviously I could just suddenly sense the people around me just like backed up, like whoa, and there was this silence, and everyone was very nervous because there was quite a few like realistic looking limbs there, and then suddenly there was this gentle kind of warmth that came about, and everyone was just bursting out laughing, and all these strangers were laughing. So it was really kind of quite a fun moment. But yeah, so I'm here to talk about limbs, and I set up the Alternative Limb Project in 2011. And this is a moment really to say that a lot of the slides I've got I've got the images, I've got the photographer's name, but there's a lot of people that I collaborate with that I won't be able to mention, but they'll all be on the website or listed under the teams section. So, yeah, I work and collaborate with electronic engineers, mechanical engineers, prosthetists, more kind of traditional crafts such as wood carving, metal work, jewelry making, jewelry makers, processes like 3D printing and CNC. So all sorts of different people kind of collaborating together on a project depending on what that project is. So if I kind of step back and talk about what my skill set is, I studied special effects to go into the film industry, and I then stepped aside and went into the medical realm, and I learned how to make realistic looking limbs for amputees. So they would all be sculpted by hand individually. I made toes, fingers, partial feet, partial hands, full arm and leg covers. I even made a bottom once. That was just a random one. Here's an example of a piece of prosthesis. So you can see there's a defined line because it has to be quite tough. Unlike the special effects where you can kind of blend all the edges in, you unfortunately get a straight line. But you can see here there's a couple of toes missing here. So yeah, one of the things to mention, I don't know which one's real and which one's not. Should we have a raise arms if you think it's the one on my left? It's one person, two person, three, and the one on the right. Oh, I've got to get better at this. Okay, I should have just said I'd just go with the majority, but yeah. So it's ultimately really challenging trying to match the body. That's what drew me into this area from special effects world. Without the tricks of the camera, you're trying to match someone that is forever changing. And actually this lady lost her leg due to blood circulation problems. So you can imagine she was just going in and out of skin tones. You just have to put your arm up. If you try this later for like a couple of minutes and then bring it down, you'll notice the two arms look completely different in color. So she was just changing all the time. And having sculpted her leg with her there, we were like, yeah, this is great. You want the vein there, blah, 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 perfect, perfect. And then she went away, came back, and I had the leg all cured and ready for her. And I saw her come in, I was like, oh, it doesn't really look like her. And then she was like, she put it on, and she was like, oh, it's not really blending in. I was like, it's okay, just have a little walk around. So she had a little walk around, and then suddenly it was like her leg had camouflaged to her body. It was like this crazy magic trick that just happened in front of me. And it was because when I'd been matching her, I was getting her to walk around quite a bit. So these prosthetics, they go in and out, and you can never get it like spot on, but as good as. This finger here has been divided here. You can see there's a trim line there. It's just underneath the ring. So you can use things like rings and jewelry to cover up. This is making a finger on a cast. I'll peel that off the cast once it's cured, and then put that on. The silicone is what I use, and I thinly apply this. So I put all the colors, pigment the silicone, loads of different skin shades, and then I kind of patch on thin layers, one on top of the other. And I sculpt, effectively I'm sculpting freehand in a mirror image, so I'll be working to the other limb. I'll take a cast of the other limb and I'll be sculpting in a mirror image. Right, so not one of my drawings, but though my drawings aren't so great. This is a little girl. So this is so when I was making these realistic limbs, one of the influences to go into the alternatives was a little girl. So a story for her. She basically lost her leg because I think she was 2 and she was in a pram. She was being pushed by her mother and her grandmother, and then just an accident happened and a bus came onto the pavement and it pinned the grandmother to the wall. So the grandmother just died at the scene, and the mother had some really bad scarring from the accident, and the little girl had to have her leg amputated. So you can imagine the stress that her mother had gone through. The little girl had kind of, it was so early she couldn't quite remember anyway, and well, and she was coming into the clinic every year to get a realistic looking limb. It was on insurance. But I started engaging with her, and she was saying, oh, you know, I said, well, would you like something a little bit different? Maybe you could have, you know, I don't know, some images of friends or things or cartoons or something. She said, yeah, that'd be really cool. And then every year I'd just kind of be working on her, like, yeah, you could do, you know, you could do this and this. And so we had this really nice friendship, and I could just see that, you know, she was bored coming in every year and having the same measurements, just to go back to have a slightly larger leg that looked like a poorer version of all her friends, what her friends had. And this way, having something a little bit different, she could kind of interact with her leg, and she was kind of getting excited about what she could have. And her friends and her family were like, oh yeah, you could have this, and oh, when am I going to feature on your leg, and blah, 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 blah. And this is actually a drawing that she gave me. She said, I'd really like a leg with drawers in it, and stickers, and blah, 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 and rubbers, and pencils, and all sorts. And yeah, so that was a bit of an inspiration from a rehabilitation perspective. I just felt that was just like quite pivotal for her to kind of engage her in the process. And then I thought, well, okay, I need to find someone that I could kind of demonstrate some really kind of outlandish ideas. I need someone bold and beautiful, and I found Victoria Modesta. So I just typed in amputee model, and I found her, and she was on the front cover of Bazaar magazine with a realistic leg, but just to the side, and she just looked really powerful. And it told a bit about her story, about she had a self-elected amputation because she had this kind of leg that wasn't, had muscle wastage, and she didn't find much use for it, so she wanted to amputate. And it was her decision, and everyone had said, don't do it, and she did it. So it was a pretty brave, bold move to make at a young age. So then she went to do the Paralympics closing ceremony, and they were going to coat her in crystals, and she said, and it was almost as if she was, you know, she had both legs and she just had this crystal suit. She said, well, you know, I know someone that could do something really special with my leg, and you might as well make a feature of it, because this is what it's about, right? So I got given all these crystals, and then I kind of had like a Swarovski like table from there to there, full of crystals. Still got some. And yeah, and then I kind of took some chunks out to make it like really visually striking in the middle. And then, yeah, made several projects with her, and this is like one of the latest ones. So this is her in zero-G gravity flights. She's pretty insane. So she was part of this program of disability in space, and then, of course, she just turned the whole thing into this photo shoot and said, oh, actually, you know, we could get a tentacle in there. Like, yeah, we could. So she had this electromagnet at the bottom of her socket, and the whole point was to have modular part components that could kind of clip on and off, and this like fluid design of like a tentacle. It was almost like the idea like a lizard shedding its tail. It's like evolution. I don't need this anymore. So it's just, yeah, that was just kind of a concept that we played with. She's just like so stunning. Oh my God, I saw the video of her floating around in space, but it was pretty brutal. She'd be like poof, chucked across the room, and then just suddenly, and that she'd have this amazing like composure in her face. It's like, wow, okay. So this was the legs. This is in the studio. Just looking kind of quite alien-like. It's quite fun. Oh yeah, and this is just like showing its fluidity, and the spine was all flexible and whatnot. But anyway, so that was piggybacked on the back of this, which was an arm. So it was we called it the Vine arm, and it had electronics in the shoes, which had, so I collaborated with this electronic engineer who had these circuits and batteries in the heels, and then we had sensors under the toes and on top. And so when she controlled she pushed up and down onto the sensors, it Bluetoothed to the, wirelessly went to the arm, and then it kind of actuated the motors and the pulleys, and it kind of gave the different degrees of freedom of movement. It was electroplated gold at the top, and I'll come to that later, and then the chassis was 3D printed, where yeah, these are all the pieces that have been carefully lined up. They had to be perfectly spaced apart. And that is the space from which the motors went in. There's the motors there, and the pulleys. And this is just a little video of her. You can see her toes kind of moving to actuate the movement. You can see that kind of wiggling. Ultimately, it'd be really good to make loads of vines for people. And then, yeah, we had to make it for exhibition. In fact, I met someone last night who said they'd seen this, and it was really challenging to get it working in the heat in Athens. But, yes, this is us kind of programming it to work for exhibition purposes. So, and then the same model, once again, gold. The reason why is because, so she was born congenital limb, so she had her arm just to here. Never really bothered with an arm, just found it cumbersome and just got in the way. But as a model, she kind of wanted to explore the idea of something alternative, and also can kind of convey that message of kind of freedom of, you know, what this could be. It could be anything. And so from kind of social interactions, just see the kind of feedback that she gets. But one thing she did say was that, oh, Sophie, you know, these limbs that you create, they're great, but they kind of cover up. You know, you're empowering people, but at the same time, you're kind of covering up what's there. And I thought that was really interesting. So we decided to make her, to gold plate the residual limb, so what she has, and then make the rest of the arm kind of quite ghostly and see transparent. And then you can see there that there's some rods going up through. And this was to allow the cables to run through, because there was a sensor that picked up her heartbeat, and it translated it into like a ticking motion in the wrist. So these kind of little plates would just kind of tick along gently. And so we kind of explored this idea of, yeah, making the most of what she had and bringing the eye to that, but at the same time having this kind of beautiful connection whereby it was translating her heartbeat in this arm. And you can see here the kind of elements broken up, so the hand was actually like a solid resin. I mean, it's not practical whatsoever. But yeah, you can see here what it looks like. Okay, this is one of my favourite ones, the cuckoo leg. So this is a beautifully carved wooden leg, and it has the electronics hidden away in the knee, and it's got a clock that works, it's got a little bell, and it's got a like swinging pendulum in the leg as well, and it's got a little bird that pops out of the knee. Why not, hey? This is Chris Parsons, who I work with. He's the prosthetist, so he does all the kind of alignment fitting. He's clinically trained to do that. You've got to be careful of the load on the rest of the body, and especially if you're doing alternative limbs, you know, you're kind of going out of the realm of normality, so kind of need him on board, really. Oh, and this is just an example of how I'm all consumed with work. And One. More. This is my kids in their school uniform. The bird's going to pop out there. Do it again. Look, the clock's going really fast. And I think there's a way of making the clock go backwards.
Yeah, then it can be Back to the Future.
Back to the Future. Yeah, Back to the Future. And you can see there's dinner there ready for them, and I'm like, put that aside, let's talk about my work. So, yeah, no, I mean, it's always really exciting, just all these different influences that you kind of bring in. This piece was filmed for a performance at Tate Modern, this kind of brutalist architecture. I love the kind of sweeping shadows, the kind of cast, and we did this beautiful film of Welly, the wearer, wearing it and then taking it off, and then it's still ticking without her. Yeah, that was really good fun. And this is kind of a fun little video. I don't think you could get bored of that, could you? Just be there all day doing that. I'd like to have one of those in like an old people's home. Anyway, yeah, so now I kind of make more pieces for, and collaborate with others to make these for exhibition purposes. So this is like more of a kind of sculptural piece, just as a kind of talking point. And it was made in several components, so using 3D scans, CAD design, 3D printing, and then it plated in gold, and then the thumb realistically sculpted by myself, and then hydro dip to make look like marble as well. This is Luc Bruyere, who I think actually is from Belgium, and he's a performing artist, a singer, and he kind of wanted to kind of question, you know, have a piece that kind of questioned his identity and who he was, and it was for a film, music video called Masculinity. And so this is him being cast, and these are the various elements that kind of came together. Yeah. So yeah, more of a sculptural piece, like less of a, you know, walking around kind of, I've got this hand pointing up at my arm, like what am I going to do with it? And more of a beautiful piece that just spoke about him and who he was. So this is a hand that was recently made with leather and 3D printing, all these little gears and cogs that were made so that it could actuate the fingers and have that all exposed as well. This was for a lady with a partial hand. Actually, there's a really nice story for another hand that was created for her with crystals. She is in her 60s, and she was born without her hand, and her mother always felt really guilty because she just felt she wanted her to have something like everybody else. And I guess it was further back in the day when, you know, it was, less, people were less open maybe. And anyway, Linda never bothered wearing, she tried lots of prosthetics and it didn't work for her. And then she said, oh, I actually saw the project and thought, oh, I'd like to, you know, explore the idea of having something alternative. And since then, her mother had passed, and she actually sent me a pot of her mother's ashes to put in the hand. So that was pretty wild. So I had to incorporate these ashes into some silicone. I was like really nervous not to like drop ashes on the floor, just make the most of every part, and incorporate it into this really beautiful hand. And I think she just wanted to be like, well, I'm kind of at peace with my hand now, Mum, and you know, this is so don't worry, you know. So I thought that was really beautiful. And this was more of a kind of different kind of functional piece that was made. And then once again, this is Kelly from earlier before, so exploring the idea of you know, how your body is made up, but does it necessarily have to be your flesh and blood? Could it be materials around you, and the idea of interchanging your body with different parts, you know? So like elements swapping in and out. And so here there's like a beautiful kind of moss section, and there's cork, resin, like a marble effect, gold, precious metals, silicon to look realistic. Yeah, I quite like that abstractness of when you mix realism with, you know, just make something quite surreal looking. Right, this was a really fun project. So this I completely went to town with. So COVID happened, and this just before that, a steam train museum contacted me saying, we've got this exhibition. We were the first people to invent steam engines over here, and we've got this museum to showcase this. We also used to have apparently a department that would make limbs for the workers, and also for people injured on tracks, because it would happen regularly back in the day. And they had the materials and the skills to do that. And so they said they wanted to kind of showcase this. Oh God, I've got these lines in the back. Anyway, and yeah, and they wanted to showcase this with this kind of contemporary art piece. And so, yeah, so I said, okay, we'll do a train-themed limb. But then COVID happened, and I got completely carried away, and I made a massive model railway landscape from like there to there. And then we had a woman plugging her leg into the landscape, a man plugging his arm into the landscape, and this little train that would just like go from him through the landscape and then into her leg, which was like insane. And then the little train had like smoke as well, and we turned it into a music video. So yeah, this is James doing all the welding. Yeah, so you can see there, so it kind of matched her other limb and then took a slice out, and the panel comes away, and that's where the train kind of slots in. And so, yeah, then I got enthusiastic. So then I got into the world of model trains and like all these brains, all these older men. I went to visit the local train club, and there was a sea of older men. They were like, oh, who's this? And I was like, right, this is what I want to do. Who can help me? And Keith was just brilliant. I love this shot because it looks like it's his leg up on the... Anyway, yeah. And so there's the leg in the landscape, and then it was really like hard to try and get the railway, the track to kind of line up perfectly with the leg, because it had to be so perfect to get the train to run across, but at the same time it had to kind of come in and out. And this was trying to get it through the door, so you can see all that lush vegetation. Limbridge, do you get it? And then this was taking it to the film studio where we, kind of decked it out, and they did the film. So yeah, here's just a little, it's very dark.
For your own safety, please stand back from the platform edge. Please mind the gap between the train and the ground. This train terminates here. All change.
It's kind of undertones of sexuality there, I think, going from the man's arm into the... Anyway, right, yeah. So, carried away. And then, yeah, so these are the pieces that were made for that exhibition. And then, yeah, I kind of quite like to display them as kind of sculptural art pieces as well. Back in the day, made this for James. So this was an interesting project. This was about 12 people working on this. James actually lost his arm in a train accident, and this was actually a sponsored project, which I just thought was an interesting concept to explore, the idea of someone sponsoring a limb. It's kind of interesting. And then, but the lady that was involved, who was working for Metal Gear Solid in Konami, the video games company, she, as a friend of mine, so she was, we were on board with each other and said, okay, let's just make it really tasteful, and as long as the person that's involved, you know, has a say in the process and what the aesthetics are. And she said, well, ultimately, they just need to want to play Metal Gear Solid, and they want to love that world. And so we found James, and he was totally up for it. Very much engaged in the whole process. The sensors on the back, so you can see there's a little drone there back in the day when the drones were like starting to be a thing. He's got sensors on the back that pick up the muscle twitches and then send that down to the arm. That was quite tricky because we had this whole, one of the things he wanted was, he said these arms are really cumbersome, but also getting shirts on and off. He said it'd be really good if you could just take the arm off. And so yeah, we did this mechanism, but of course we still had to pass this the electrics through. So that was quite challenging. And we worked with Open Bionics, where they do like low-cost 3D printing hands, and yeah, so they did this, and then we had all the kind of lighting effects as well, and then this kind of storage area for the for this little drone. And this is like a one-handed controller that he had also for the drone. So that was a pretty fun project, and also it really kind of made him, the whole process really made him engage with his arm and what he wants from his arm, and he got a lot of attention after this, and used it also to fundraise. Towards fundraising titanium implants, which is the idea of osseointegration, where you have a rod that's kind of titanium rod that's implanted into your bone, and then the skin kind of grows around. Effectively, it's like an open wound. Got a lady that I'm making a leg for that has this, and yeah, but it means that you don't have to bother with the socket, and so for a leg you don't have to have all this, which is really annoying, because if you swell up one day, you get too hot or whatever, then you're not fitting the leg, or you put on a little bit of weight, you're not fitting the leg, that means you can't walk, and therefore then you put on more weight, and it's just a vicious circle. And so sometimes people can be off their legs for ages just because of the problem with the rigidity of the socket. So having this idea of osseointegration, it means that there's direct contact through this titanium rod into the bone, so it's not kind of load bearing around on the surrounding areas. And you can actually get the feedback as well. So for her, when she's walking, she'll feel the ground that kind of vibrating through into the bone. So that's quite an interesting concept. This is Andrew, a performing artist. He's a pole dancer, champion pole dancer. He's pretty rad, and I loved his tattoos. And we talked about how we could kind of make this piece, because he said he wanted something that would match his profile in terms of the length of his other leg, but be something quite otherworldly. He loved the idea of stilettos. I was like, okay. So, and then we worked on the idea of this kind of hoof, that could kind of clip onto the pole, and then have this beautiful kind of structure, kind of elegant structure going up that also matches in with his tattoos. And then you've got the sculpture in the back here that spins around. So when he's spinning around the pole, this piece spins around as well. So this is an amazing kinetic artist called Ivan Black, and he kind of worked with me on this, which was pretty cool. And so here's the structure. Here's the socket, and then there's just like the pole that goes through, right through for the structure, so it's load bearing. And then I could kind of work on the outside of that. So I did that in fiberglass, and then checking the alignment. And this was like an example of where he touches the pole with his leg. And so a normal kind of socket would be, completely surrounded. He wouldn't have that skin contact, and he needs that to be able to kind of slide up and down. So we'd adapted the socket, so you can see it's kind of cut away at the back. So that's kind of Chris Parsons kind of coming in with his magic as well. Oh my gosh, I've still got 8 seconds. And then this is a piece for a lovely guy who was in Afghanistan, and he stepped on a mine, and he wanted something a bit different. He said he was up for he'd like to see his toes again, but he said other than that you can be kind of out this world with. So I matched his toes, and then I took hairs from the back of his head, and then I kind of one by one put them in, and then we kind of went quite surreal with the other pieces. He was quite interested in kind of the underwater life and shells and stuff, so we kind of looked at these kind of muscle plates that looked a bit like that, and that could kind of clip on and off. And I just really when we went, I remember walking with him, taking a walk, and it was just really interesting, because from a social interaction perspective, because he said, back in the day, he was so used to being with the military amongst loads of veterans that had parts blown off, and they'd be saying things like, oh, that's just a scratch wound, they'd have that kind of mentality. And then stepping out into civilian life, where people were at the time kind of like, oh wow, okay, this guy's got he had his arm missing and his leg missing, and for him he'd be like, oh, what are you staring at, come on, it's like, get over it kind of thing. And he said to me, I just want something to give people something that I feel like would be worth staring at. So it's like, okay, that's a really interesting concept. And people were coming up to him and saying, wow, okay, right, so that's your foot, but what's going on here? He was like, well, that's not my foot, obviously, because that's like, how could that be my foot? And all of a sudden, he's kind of like in the position where he's kind of like fooling people and playing tricks on their mind, and it's kind of coming from this playful, fun perspective as opposed to like a feeling of pity. And, people kind of coming up and going, oh, wow, that's so cool, I want one. It's like you would never say that back in the day. And so, it just changes the conversation. And there was one lady who, when I started the project, and she said, oh, that's really cool what you're doing, that sounds really fun, but I don't think I would have anything like that. And then like 3 years down the line, she came back to me and she was like, right, I've got this idea. I want some lasers in my leg, right? And I was like, she was just like really went off on one. And she wore this leg and it was brilliant. It had kind of like all this reflective material and this lights like, and but she said she just couldn't walk for like 100 meters without like, 10 people stopping her. Like, oh my God, that's amazing. And so there's obviously, like everyone, we all have our clothes are part of our identity and what the message that we want to convey. And I think it's just that idea of freedom and choice. And maybe one day you want to stand out and you want to celebrate your difference. And for other people, they just don't want, they want to blend into society and not be noticed first and foremost for being an amputee. And I guess, that comes round to this last image, which is of Dan. And it's just that idea of, making, putting the leg aside and just questioning what I have here, and is this an opportunity to do something different or the same, replica the same, but to see it as in a new way, as a kind of opportunity. And that's it. Still got 4 minutes. Thank you.